In this video, I'm going to share my top tips for filming an obstacle course race using a GoPro or action cam. Now, I have made a lot of mistakes with this over the years, so if I can stop you from making those same mistakes, you'll be making awesome videos right from your very first event. My name is Luke Sharon, and today I'm going to share my top tips for filming an obstacle course race. I'm going to talk about the best settings to use, pre-race preparation, general tips, and most importantly, how to film better shots on the day. So for this video, I'm going to be using the GoPro Hero 5. If you have an earlier version of the GoPro or a different make of action cam, a lot of these settings will still apply, but there might be some slight differences between the makes and models. So first things first, let's take a look at the settings, and in terms of the video, I like to film at 1080p at 50 frames per second. For me, this provides the best compromise between quality and convenience on the day. Now, if you're filming on the GoPro Hero 5, you do have higher resolutions available like 2.7K and 4K, but I don't like to use these for 4 reasons. The first reason is that at 4K you can't film at 50 frames per second, and that's important, and I'll explain why in a moment. Number 2 is that I want to keep the file size reasonable. The larger the resolution, the more memory that will take up. 3 is that I want to maximize the battery life. Again, the higher resolution you film at, the more it drains the battery. And number 4, finally, I want to make sure that my computer or my laptop can easily render the footage. 4K footage requires quite a high-powered computer to be able to process and render it. So next is the frame rate, and again, I recommend filming at 50 frames per second. The reason for this is then you can slow your footage down and get some super smooth, cinematic, slow-mo effects from the footage that you filmed. Now again, if you're filming on a GoPro Hero 5, you can film as high as 120 frames per second. However, I've never needed to film that high or slow my footage down that much. This again comes back to a compromise between quality and battery life and file size. Next is the view, which can be a little bit subjective, but personally I like to film on a linear view. The super wide angles are pretty cool and there's definitely a place for them, but for most of the filming of the obstacles, I think a linear view is better, and this is more what you'd see with a traditional camera when you are filming. Now, if your action cam has stabilization, make sure that it's enabled. This will just mean that your footage is a little bit smoother and a little bit nicer to watch. For the actual camera settings, this depends on how good you are at editing and color grading when you actually come to process your footage. If this is something that you're really good at, then you probably want to go for a flat profile, in which case I'd recommend turning Pro Tune off and probably turning sharpening off as well. If you're not very confident with editing or you don't know what color grading is, I'd recommend leaving Pro Tune on and probably putting sharpening to medium. At these settings, the footage looks pretty good straight out the camera and you won't need to do a great deal with it. The final tip would be to make sure that Wi-Fi and your screen is switched off on the day. You won't need either of these functions during the event, and this will help extend your battery life quite considerably. Okay, so now your camera's all set up and ready to go. My next tips are pre-race tips. These might sound pretty obvious, but they can save you some serious headaches on the day. So the first tip is pretty obvious, but just make sure your GoPro is fully charged. There's nothing worse than getting to the event and realizing you've only got 20 minutes of filming time because you haven't charged your GoPro. Next, make sure that you have a memory card and that it's formatted and fully clear, so you've got a full amount of space on the day. Now, I would recommend having at least a 16GB card in your GoPro, but ideally probably around 32GB just to be sure. When I did Tough Mudder, I had 24GB of files on my memory card, so making sure you've got enough space is pretty crucial. Finally, make sure you've got your name and a contact number either on your GoPro or on the frame. This way, if you lose it, there's a chance you might get it back. So now let's talk about some more general tips for filming on the day. The first thing I'd recommend is to use a head harness. Now, there's all kinds of different harnesses you can get. There's a body harness, there's one for your wrist. I've even seen people running around with selfie sticks, and one guy had it mounted on his shoulder a bit like a parrot. All of these are fine, but in my opinion, a head harness is the best because it keeps your hands free. It's always pointing where you're looking, wherever your face is pointing, and it's never covered up, regardless of whether you're swimming or climbing or crawling through a tunnel. Now, if you're wearing a head harness, you want to make sure that the camera is angled actually slightly lower than you might expect. I can't tell you how many times I thought I was looking straight ahead and the camera was actually pointing at the sky. And this footage is completely unusable. Now, a mistake I used to make was I used to film the entire event. As soon as I went past the start line, I would press the record button and start filming and just leave it running until I got to the finish line. Now, you can do it this way, but I would recommend against it. Depending on how long it takes you to complete the race, you might actually film the entire event either because your battery runs out or because you use up all the space on your memory card. Additionally, about 80% of the footage, if not more, is just going to be of you running, which isn't particularly interesting, and you'll probably just edit out at the end anyway. So I would recommend turning the GoPro on and off, turning it on when you get to an obstacle and turning it off when you've completed that obstacle. Now, this leads quite nicely onto my next tip, and that's that you should learn the beeps. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you have a GoPro, it makes different beeps depending on what function it's doing. Now, if you turn the GoPro on, it should have 3 beeps. If I press record to film, it should do a single beep. Now, when I stop filming, it should do another single beep followed by 3 beeps. And if I turn it off, I think it does 7 beeps, but it's quite a lot. Now, if you can learn these beeps, what it means is that you can keep the GoPro on your head without constantly needing to take it on and off and check that it's on, check that it's recording. You'll just know instinctively by the number of beeps. With all that said, I would actually recommend taking your harness off for certain obstacles. This could be for filming reasons, which I'll cover later, but also because you will avoid the risk of losing your GoPro. This is something that's happened to me before in the past with a brand new GoPro Hero 4 Black Edition, and I still have nightmares about it to this day. Okay, so now I'm going to provide you with some specific tips for filming on the day. The first tip would be to remember to have very smooth and purposeful head movement. This can be difficult to remember, but can make a huge difference to the quality of your footage. If you move your head very quickly in a jerky fashion, it can be quite difficult to watch and even quite nauseating. Remember that essentially you are a cameraman for the day, so almost imagine that there's a big camera stuck to your head. It will make a big difference to the quality of your footage. Next would be to actually film your own face. Now, this might sound really strange, but if you think about it, for 90% of this video is going to be from your point of view, and the stars of the show are essentially your hands and your feet. Now, there'll be certain obstacles on the day where you will need to jump from something, or you'll need to take your GoPro off and hold on to it. When you do that, hold your GoPro up and actually film your face, film your expression as you're doing it. It'll be far more interesting for the viewer to watch. The next tip would be to keep an eye out for anything interesting happening around you. This could be somebody stuck in some mud, it could be a really good inspiring team moment, it could be somebody dressed as a superhero or in a pink tutu, or in an extreme case somebody could catch fire. Of course, I'm joking about the whole catching fire thing, but just keep an eye out for anything interesting that's going on, and you never know, it might make it to the final cut of your video. Now, if you're thinking about the different shots, you can get very creative with your shooting angles on a day. And if you're with a team of people, you can actually set up some shots quite nicely. At the last event I went to, I would ask my friend to film me climbing over an obstacle. He would then throw the GoPro over to me, and I would film him coming up from the other side of the obstacle. Now, if you know that somebody is about to attempt a big obstacle or do a cool jump or jump over some fire, get down low, try and get like a really cool epic angle for filming that shot, and again, that will make a big difference to the quality of your footage. Now, if you wanted to get really clever with this, you could do some research before you go. These courses don't change much year on year, and there's always a couple of obstacles that are always there, like the monkey bars or the warped wall. Take a look at the other footage that people got from the years before, work out how you can make it better, or what cool creative angles you could use on the day. This then leads to my final tip, and it's if you're running with a team, make sure you take it in turns to film on the day. That way you get to be in the video as well, not just your hands and your feet. So those are my tips. Now, they might sound pretty obvious, but believe me, they'll make a big difference to the quality of your footage on the day. Now, if you're interested in how I edit that footage, let me know in the comments below, and if enough people are interested, I might make a follow-up video on how to edit it as well. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more great content like this. Filming an obstacle. Tips for filming an obstacle course race. Filming an obstacle course. Filming an obstacle course race. Obstacle course race. For filming an obstacle course race. I can't say obstacle course.